Okay, so what sort of context kind of helps, and certainly this morning, hearing those different contexts, sort of similar issues that I'm sure many of us in there sort of grapple with, hearing it through a different context can be really helpful. And so I kind of ended this morning with quite a lot of energy, and quite into kind of energy and in leadership. And one of the energies that we talk about in my trust, that's very important in leadership, is spirit energy. So the sort of the future, hopefulness in the future. And I'm quite well drilled at reading in myself when my energy levels go up and go down, because I say to my colleagues at the trust that your first and foremost job as a leader is to manage your own energy, and then that of those around you, which Strocker said. So I pinched that, and I think it's a really important thing. So I noticed my energy going up. I don't know if any of you did. Yeah, I'm getting some nods there, and I think that's a brilliant thing, even if the energy leads to a slight sense of, I don't know quite what to do. So Toby's talking about sort of less of that and a bit more of this. I think there's going to be a bit more of that, actually, if I'm really honest, because when we have lots of conversations about trying to be innovative and look at things differently. Toby's a real wizard in my sort of professional world in terms of someone who will hold me to account over those things and encourage me to think differently, which I like to do. So there was the title. And I just kind of started to pull some stuff together the last few days and thought, God, if only. If only we had cross-boundary innovation in education. Because my starting point is it's quite barren currently in the world of education. Now, that I'm going to talk from my own personal perspective. I'm going to talk about some of the local authorities that my trust spans. It's my personal view, okay? And I'll talk respectfully but critically about some of the things I see in front of me happening. Okay, so this is us. So we're a primary school, Matt. There are 7 primary schools in the trust. I too was a teacher in London, came up, deputy head, exec head, you know the rest. But I'm a CEO through the headship route, not through a civil service route, as is starting to happen. With primary schools, we serve a predominantly disadvantaged communities. If you look at our average sort of disadvantage rate, it's probably about 40 to 50%. So we've got schools with quite a low, one school with a low level of disadvantage, and schools up to about 80%. So quite a mixed bag in that sense. I would say that we do our best work as a trust with our more disadvantaged communities. I won't give you stats because you can get them for that in schools. And you don't. But basically, primary school trust, and we have schools in Darlington, North Yorkshire, and Middlesbrough. So. 40 per day. Go and have a guess. In the context of all of this that we've talked about, what do you reckon 40 per day might be?
Primary school children, permanent excluded.
Excellent. 40 per day. Permanent exclusions, 40 per day. Nationally. Okay. So, let me just explain, if I may, how one local authority, perhaps be Darlington, one local authority, and I say this respectfully of the leaders involved in it, but quite critically, are seeking currently. It really typifies the kind of system, top-down system approach to these difficult situations that we're facing, because that's vulnerable pupil panel, VPP. You go down to everyone talks about VPP. What are you going to do about that? They've got the VPP. The VPP, which I'll tell you a little bit about, has done that. 22 permanent exclusions have happened in Darlington since September.
Primary exclusion.
Across both phases. 22 permanent exclusions. And the VPP meets every 3 weeks, and on average 10 to 12 referrals going into it. And again, respectfully, and I know some of the people at the senior level in the local authority who are involved in that. I work in partnership with them. So this isn't a big kind of slag off. I'm just saying this is the reality. The protocols that are there mean people are holding on to the fact that this is answering the question. So the VPP has responsibility for ensuring that managed fair access protocols are honoured and managed moves take place. But actually the reality of how it works is that children's needs are discussed in a confidential environment, for sure, they are, but with people, about as many people as this. And the crunch point being, what do we then do about these children? young people? Where do they go? Where's their fresh start? Where's the doing it differently bit? Is discussed kind of like this. Imagine if I was talking about children now, saying, here's Toby. Toby's about to be permanently excluded from the secondary school level. And it was Mike's turn last time to have someone, and Julie's had a tricky one, but it's your turn this time. It feels so transactional. It's like a kind of bidding war. The first time I experienced it, I was just kind of enraged by this. So I made a few observations. I went back and said, look, do you think it should be independently chaired? That might be a start point. Is this a kind of stopgap? Yeah, it is. It's about actually, and this is one of the sort of perfect storm thing. Sarah was talking about the triple crisis. There is a bit of a triple crisis there. You've got the system pressure bit of it. You've got the background of austerity, and you've got the fact that in that gap, the ways of dealing with children who are vulnerable, particularly in terms of the way they present, in terms of their behaviours in school, in that gap, it feels like 20 years ago. It feels like Kes and Brian Glover. It feels My Way or the Highway, Sonny. I'm a sort of character, but not, a personal view. That is a personal view. But there's something in that, I have to say. And the pot, so what did I say? Pots and suits and backpacks, didn't I? So that's the high needs pot. So local authorities have a high needs pot, as you know, and that's there to fund high need. And slight anecdote, but it's relevant to this morning's conversation. So obviously, because of my role within North East Wellbeing, I'm acutely aware of this exciting project in the West End of Newcastle. Thank you. Looking at link workers and how that might, and I'm just saying, if ever there was a test bed for this kind of somewhere else, oh my God, it's Darlington. And how much does it cost to do this? £100,000 to fund X number of workers. So we have a meeting to try and sort of start that. It's a bit like the kind of 747 on the runway. Get those starting to kind of turn over. Can we get any traction? And such is the sort of narrative about reactive, proactive, inability to upstream, just take the money you've got and live in the short term. But it's just another example of, are you honestly telling me that an investment of £100,000 and the good that could do in terms of proactively stopping some of the high needs pot having to be spent on £100,000 per placements for about 12 children within the authority go outside of the authority? Could do a Rosie Blackburn, my daughter. Oh, no, Dad. Just come on. But isn't it just? It absolutely intrigues me. But even though those, and I'm an old chap now, and the circle of having these conversations. I remember first having them about nurture provision, and EBD provision, and saying, let's do this. You won't have to build and open another EBD school over there because these children will. So look, 5 minutes I've got. Not enough love, too much fear in the system. What needs to change and why? What's our current thinking? Let me just share a book with you, which medical colleagues in the room might know. Communities of Influence, absolutely fascinating book. And it's about how the Macmillan Cancer Care charity created a community of influence around cancer care. And it's really nicely written. I'm not an academic by any means, and I love reading. And I just was first chapter, and I'm highlighting bloody everything because I'm thinking this is just great, because what it's saying, which I think really helps whatever you go and do from this, is it says, I've put that, and I do think that we need determined and brave leadership at all levels. There's too many chickens in the system, too scared to do stuff, far too scared. So we absolutely need that. But this book, and I'm sure in a lot of our brains and thoughts at the minute, is the whole thing about partnerships and collaboration is where we need to be at. And these sort of managerial bureaucratic approaches like the VPP they just don't work in a lot of situations, and when there's not enough emphasis on conversations, relationships. I remember someone saying to me early in my headship, Nick, don't talk about relationships and that kind of pink fluffy stuff. People won't take you seriously as a leader. But read the book, do some thinking, building informal coalitions. We saw a brilliant example of that. And it was when Mike said there's no money. Brilliant. Well, not brilliant, but things can happen without money. It's about culture. We need to work through network relationships and conversations. We need culture, not systems. We need capacity, not resources. We'll have some resources, please, but if we want to make a change, the beauty is, what can make most difference in Darlington is free. It's free. Because it's thinking and commitment and working in a coalition. And that's my thinking there is, if I was going to do a hierarchy of need thing, because I use triangles a lot in my work. What's got to go where? What have I got to do first? What have I got to do first? Okay, so we ask questions about what's the role of schools. We are reaching out. We're trying to be an authentic partner when we're doing this work. We're trying to establish partnerships to look at this differently. And we are trying to be mature, and use our influence to shape and guide, and to not hide it away. Calling all. So, community of influence. If you're interested, you could be, email me. If it's something that you're interested in, and lots of people emailed, and we've sensed there is a kind of growing sense of people want to do stuff, I would probably be speaking to you and saying, right, come on, let's take this to another level. Okay, thank you very much for listening.